my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, wearing his girls basketball Olmsted Falls state champ
State
sweatshirt.
champion.
Nice,
Yeah.
good work. I know we talked about this last week, so we're not going to
We're not
belabor
gonna.
the
I
point
don't
of high school
know.
basketball. We're going to get right into the NBA. So Jay, I know there's a lot of interesting things going on in the league right now.
Okay.
Where are we starting? Where are
I
we
think we have to.
starting tonight?
I think we have to start with the game that happened. Just ended a little bit ago. It's 11:30 now, but the Lakers and Bucks went to double overtime. The Lakers playing without LeBron. Uh, Austin Reeves triple double. Anthony Davis huge down the stretch. Giannis also had a triple double. Uh, the Bucks had a 19-point game with 8 minutes and 24 19-point lead with 8 minutes and 24 seconds left, I think. And I'll be honest with you, Mike, like I had it on in the background. I was like grading some stuff and getting some stuff ready for the next 2 days of school, and trying to get stuff ahead for when we get back from break, because I'm not going to be doing any work over break. And I like looked away, and then the next thing I knew, it was like a 4 point game, and I was like, "What just happened?" Like, and apparently um their defense was terrible. The Bucks had a terrible stretch of defense, um, and then yeah, there was some great plays down the stretch, sent it to overtime, some key blocks, and then after it goes overtime, we go to double overtime, where Reeves hits a huge three, and then from there, they hit some clutch free throws down the stretch of the Lakers, and it was what it was. There was a really good out of bounds play drawn up for end of regulation for Giannis, but Giannis missed like a point blank shot. Um, and yeah, so it was pretty exciting, Mike. It was exciting stuff. And the Lakers win. Good for the Cavs. Bad for the Bucks. Good for the Lakers. The Lakers are pretty much solidified in the play in at this point. They're solidified in the at least the 9 seed, because I think they now have a 4 game lead over the Warriors. If I'm not incorrect, the Warriors are in trouble. I don't know if that's we'll
Warriors
go.
beat the Heat though tonight.
Yeah, Draymond like choke slammed a guy again. Or like he didn't actually choke slam. He may have fouled a guy and grabbed him by his neck. Um,
He may have.
he may have, Mike. He
You
may
may have
have
done that. You may have done it.
he may have done that. So, but yeah, huge win for the Lakers. Huge win.
So obviously to do it without LeBron is huge for LA. And you look at the Lakers, and for so long during this season, it feels like they've been flirting with 500. And you look at their record now, and they're 40-32. So I think they're pretty well entrenched, probably into that 9 seed. I mean, Phoenix has a really tough schedule down the stretch. Phoenix right now is 2 games ahead of the Lakers. But I know that their last few games, in fact, I'm going to pull up their schedule just so we can talk a little bit about that. But they are over these last whatever 10, 12 games, whatever we have left, they have just a murder's row as far as the end of their schedule. So if we look at it, here are their last several games. So they play. Here's their next. Here's San Antonio. The rest of their schedule: Denver, at Denver, by the way, at Denver, at Oklahoma City, at New Orleans, home against the Cavs, home against Minnesota, home against New
Wait, this
Orleans.
is your this is L.A., right?
This is Phoenix. This is Phoenix's schedule.
Okay, you said San Antonio. I'm really confused.
I
Okay,
said
so
San Antonio. Oh,
you did.
I must have read. I must
You
have read San Antonio because that was who
you
the.
said here's San Antonio's schedule, and I was like, wait, what?
Okay,
Okay,
well,
so
I'm
Phoenix.
totally confused. It is 11:39 right now. But anyway,
Yeah,
San Antonio was who the Phoenix Suns lost to. They did a little baseball series. Those were the last 2 games they played. So maybe I was reading that off the schedule. So no, this is not San Antonio's schedule or the Lakers' schedule. This is the Phoenix Suns schedule at Denver, at Oklahoma City, at New Orleans, home for the Cavs, home for Minnesota, home for New Orleans, home for the Clippers, at Sacramento, at Minnesota. So every one of those teams, at least the first, until you get to Sacramento, Sacramento is the only team that is not in the top 5 in their conference. That is a murderer's.
Sacramento's looking like they're going to drop down into the play-in tonight, because Dallas is up 20 on them right now.
And they have a home and home. So I believe the next game between these two teams is, I think it's on Friday that they play again. So clearly, if Dallas sweeps Sacramento, that's going to put Dallas in a pretty good spot to be able to because I would assume then they would get the tiebreaker over Sacramento. And I don't know what the previous where they are in terms of season series, but you would
We're
think if Dallas gets
Doncic
both
is
of those games,
Doncic has 28, 10, and 5 with 3 steals already
yeah,
in
I
the
mean
third
he's
quarter. So
ridiculous. He's ridiculous. So that would pretty much, I think, move Dallas, have them feeling pretty good about getting the 6th seed, and that would drop Sacramento into that 7-8 game. So I think when you look at Phoenix's schedule, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that, I mean, I don't know how many of those games Phoenix wins, but I think they would be doing a heck of a job if they could finish 500 over this stretch of games. And if they go 500, I think you have to, if you're the Lakers, you have to think you have a pretty good chance of overtaking them and getting out of the 9-10 spot, which clearly you don't want to have to win 2 games in the play in just to be able to get into the playoffs as the number 8 seed. I mean, for Phoenix right now, them being in the play in, considering everything that they put into this Kevin Durant trade and the sign and the Beal trade, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, there's not really a path. I guess you could say next year that if they're healthier, that they play a complete season and yeah, they get back up towards the top of the Western Conference. But I'm not sure that Kevin Durant is getting any better as he ages another year. And I'm certainly not sure that Bradley Beal is getting better as he ages another year. Maybe you could say that Booker is still in his prime and improving and getting better. But as we've said all season long since you first put this team together, these guys, their track record says they're not going to stay healthy, and they haven't been able to stay healthy this season, with the exception of Durant, who's been fairly available. Beal obviously has been never or nearly never available, and Booker has kind of been in and out of the lineup all season. So when you look at the Lakers, it feels like most of the season we've been asking the question or we've been reading about, hey, the Lakers are circling around 500. They're going to be in that 9-10 play-in spot. And if they continue to play well, I think there's a decent chance that they can get to that number 8 seed or get to that 8th spot. And that takes them out of, then they only got to win one play-in game. And look, I think that the question is, right, who do the Lakers want to play? I think they want to play Oklahoma City, right? Of the top seeds, I think that's who, if they could draw anybody, I think
yeah,
they'd probably want to draw OKC just because of the
just
size
young.
factor.
They're young.
Yep.
They're young. Yeah.
Minnesota. I mean, I know Minnesota has the size, so the advantage that the Lakers might have against Oklahoma City kind of goes away with Minnesota. But Minnesota, you have the same concerns, right, as you do about Oklahoma City, just in terms of their experience as a team and their first time going through it as constituted with Edwards, and who knows when Towns is going to be back. So I don't know that, man, the Lakers are such a hard team to figure out because you feel like basically LeBron and Davis have been healthy all year, and yet they're still down currently in the number 9 seed. And like we said, maybe they crawl up into number 8, but they're a hard team to read. They win the in-season tournament. They look great doing that. Then they kind of fall into a tailspin. They've been, I would say, very mediocre all year, despite the fact that Davis and LeBron have been pretty much healthy the whole entire season. And they're both arguably going to be on the all NBA team when all is said and done. Hard to believe that Anthony Davis is not going to make it. And when you look at LeBron's statistics, it's hard to believe he's not going to make at least the third team. And so you're
Yeah.
talking about 2 all NBA guys having really good seasons at their ages, and yet they're still down in the. It speaks to the strength of the Western Conference, but based on what I'm seeing from a schedule standpoint, I think they probably are able to catch Phoenix because I just don't see many wins there on Phoenix's schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, let's talk on the other side of the coin, Milwaukee. Like, what are they like? Their defense has been so bad in games, and then they're very streaky. It seems like they go through spurts where they're playing really good on the defensive end, and then it's like they get lazy. They just get lazy, and Doc's always been known for having a pretty good defense, right? Like, I mean, I'm not counting his Joel Embiid years, okay,
I would
but
say
like
that's probably been his,
his
I
MO
don't
has
want to
always
say his
been.
calling card, but certainly with the Celtics when they won the title, they won that title. I would say you consider those teams to be defensive minded teams, right? When you throw Kevin Garnett out there and the sort of the leadership that he showed on that end of the floor, I think yeah, it's probably fair to say.
So and like I'm gonna play the same card, like the same game that you played with the Bucks here. This is the Bucks schedule, and honestly, I see two games out of their last, what do they got? 12 games, 11 games that are like they should definitely win. The other games I think could, you could coin flip them almost. Pelicans, I think that's a coin flip depending on what Pelicans team shows up, right? Okay. And that's because that's at New Orleans. Okay. They play at Atlanta, which they should win that game. All right. I mean, I guess 3 games because they got Washington too. So at Washington, Memphis, for some godforsaken reason, plays good against the good teams. I don't know what it is about Memphis, but they've been playing well against good teams, and then they get blown out by Wizards. I think they lost to the Wizards the other day. Okay. Then they play Toronto, who's not a team that's like going quietly into the night, even though they're terrible. Okay. Then they go the last 5 games of the year for the Bucks. The Knicks, the Celtics, Orlando, OKC, Orlando. Like
So you
those.
have to figure, right, for of four of those last five. I mean, the schedule's pretty soft. Atlanta, Washington, Memphis, Toronto. That's a nice little stretch where if you're the Bucks, you got to think we're going 4-0 in those games. But then those last five, New York's going to be playing hard. Boston could be
Boston
resting
might.
people at that
They
point.
could. Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, they may not, but they certainly could be. They're going to have the
That's
Eastern
gonna be a week.
Conference and the
That's gonna be a week before the season ends. That's April
yeah.
9th.
So
So that's
there's a decent chance that even if guys play, they're going to play 25 minutes and not 35 minutes. So
yeah.
and then Orlando, Oklahoma City are both going to be playing for something. You have to guess. Maybe not in the final game of the season. Who knows? Teams at that point could be trying to angle for different seeding and trying to find a particular opponent. But I think it's look, what matters here is that when you're 2 games behind, you have to have obviously a 2 games better record. I don't know the Cavs. What's the tie? What's the tiebreaker between
We have the
the Cavs?
tiebreaker. We have the tiebreaker because we have a better in division record than they do. We clinched it when we beat Indiana the other day.
So Have we played them
We're 2-2. We're 2-2
two
against
and two?
Milwaukee. So then when
Okay.
it goes to 2-2, then they go to the division record, and we are
Okay.
we are going to have a better division record than
Okay.
um division. We are 10-5. Okay, and they are 10-7. But because we've beaten them, we are because of something. Because the division record, because they played an extra game, because of the in-season tournament, they played an extra game and lost that in-season tournament game. That counts as a freaking division game. So like they played an extra
Okay.
game.
Gotcha. Yep.
So the worst we can do is 10-6, which is a better division record than them at 10-7.
Right. They have no games left in their division or in
We
our
have
division.
and we have one. So
So all
we've
right.
clinched. So
Okay.
the in
So it's
season
not
tournament
it's
hurt
not
may have
completely
hurt
out of
them.
yeah, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, I guess, for the Cavs to be able to catch the Bucks. Although I can honestly say that over the last week I've spent a lot more time looking at the teams behind us, hoping that they don't pass us versus looking ahead of us at the Bucks. I kind of feel like that ship had sailed. Although, if you only have to make up 2 games and the Cavs have the tiebreaker, it makes it a little bit more feasible. Although, again, I feel like Milwaukee's been playing better. I do think you make a great point that they've been pretty inconsistent. And I think part of that is right. Middleton, you're still trying to reintegrate him back into what they're doing. But then I think the bigger part of it has just been that Lillard has been really, really up and down, and he's had way more poor games this season than he has at any point in his career. He's still had big scoring games, and he's still very capable. And obviously, he's still the guy that you're afraid of in the last 2 minutes of a game that can create whatever kind of shot you want him to create. But the fact is that he has not shot the ball extremely well by his standards over the course of the season. And last year in Portland, I think it was his best scoring year of his career. And he has not approached that level
Yeah.
of production as where he was at last year. So he's shooting just 42% from the floor overall. And let me see what he's shooting on threes, if I can find that. So he's shooting 36% on threes, which again isn't terrible. That's probably like league average. But for Dame, clearly not up to the standard that you would normally expect from him. So, look, the question I think becomes, right, when we talked about this, I don't, maybe the Cavs can catch him. I still think that Milwaukee is probably really realistically the only team in the East that has a chance to beat the Celtics. Although, again, the Celtics, where are you at on the Celtics? Just tell me where you're at.
I mean, I think they have to be the favorite in the East, right? I mean, they're up by 11 games. But there's just something that's
I agree.
that stench in the air, that entitled stench of the Boston Celtics. The whole the whole thing with Missoula trying to block someone's shot when the whistle the quarter ended, like that's ridiculous. Get out of here. I'm not like get out of here with that
What do you rank
nonsense.
that compared to Jason Kidd's cup spill?
I don't know that. I
I
think the cup spill's worse, but
think the cup spill's worse. When you're using props, I think that's probably worse.
yeah, I agree. But yeah, I something about the Celtics. Like, listen, I don't want to say this but would I be surprised if the Miami Heat somehow did it again? I just wouldn't like
I
I
wouldn't be surprised either. I would not be surprised at
like
all. Would not surprise me at all.
listen, the best case scenario probably for the Cavs. Okay, let me just throw this out there. Somehow the Cavs, if Miami ends at the 7 seed and the Bucks end at the 2 seed, I mean, I don't want to. The Cavs probably. I think the Cavs want to fall to 4 in that case because then we would play the Celtics in the second
So here's the
round.
question: Do you want the 2 seed if Miami's going to be there?
No, I don't. I don't want it. I don't
So
want to touch it.
so would you? I think if you're the Cavs, right? If you're the 3, it looks like you're probably going to get the Pacers.
That sounds good.
I, I'd be okay with that matchup. If you're the 4, that means you've probably been passed by
The
most
Knicks.
likely
The
the
Knicks.
Knicks,
You're gonna play
which means you get the
Orlando.
Magic in the first round, which I think
I wouldn't
I'd be
mind that
okay with
either.
that too. I would much rather play Orlando. Now, I don't want Orlando to pass the Knicks and the Cavs. And for the 4 or 5, I really don't want to play the New York Knicks in the first round again. But I
I
think for the Cavs, if you finish third and you're going to get the Pacers, or you're going to finish fourth and you're going to get Orlando, in both of those series, you'd have home court advantage. And then if you look at the second round, I'm not sure that, look, I guess from that standpoint, if you got the 2 seed and you could beat whether it's Miami or whoever it is, I mean, I think it's probably fairly likely that Miami would get the 7 seed based on where we are and based on who they are. But I don't know what you've heard, but everything that I've read and listened to, it sounds like that out of Philadelphia, that they really think that Embiid is going to be back at some point, maybe even in the regular season. And if you bring back, and look, Embiid's not going to be in great shape, and not that he ever is in the playoffs, as we've talked about over and over again. But clearly, the Philadelphia 76ers, even with an 80% ramped up Joel Embiid, now suddenly that looks a lot different. The question is, I think, would you rather have a favorable first round matchup and then not have potentially home court in the second round against, it would obviously be Milwaukee. Boston's not falling through. So if the Cavs get to 2, you might have a tougher first round opponent, but then you'd have home court advantage in the second round. I think I'd rather have an easier And don't get me wrong, the Cavs could easily lose to Orlando or Indiana.
Yeah.
But I
I,
think you'd rather have an easier first round series and then take your chances as the road team against Milwaukee. I'm not sure I'd feel that much better against the Bucks if we had home court advantage versus we didn't have home court advantage. And I'm not
listen,
so
listen.
sure I would rather play the Celtics.
It ultimately, Mike, comes down to, is Donovan Mitchell able to play basketball? I mean, that's what it comes
And
down
able
to.
to play it at the same level that he's played it in the regular season, right? Last year in the playoffs, his performance was an abomination. I mean, he was terrible in that Knicks series. I remember we talked about it before game 5. I'm like, there's no way that Mitchell doesn't show up for this game in a big way. And he didn't show up for that game at all. And look, the rest of
Yeah.
the team played horrendously, but your best player, and look, Mitchell's been a guy who has had huge playoff series and has been a guy who's played well, but he certainly did not play well in that series last year. And so there's a lot of interesting possibilities in the Eastern Conference and specifically for the Cavs. But I guess if I had to take my vote, I would hope that they get either Orlando or Indiana in the first round. And then to be honest, I really don't care that much whether it's Milwaukee or Boston in the second round. And to be honest, I'm not so sure as good as Boston's been. I'm not so sure I wouldn't rather play the Celtics in the first round rather than the Bucks. I mean, I don't think the Cavs really are going to beat either team, but we've played pretty well against the Celtics, and I really don't like the Cavs' chances of slowing down Giannis. Whereas I think we have a better chance of being able to stop what Boston does well. And yet, Boston could easily just blow the doors off the Cavs, but so could the Bucks. And so I don't think I think I'd rather take my chances with Tatum and Brown than Giannis and Lillard if I'm the Cavs.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Was that your dog making noise in the background, or?
No, surprisingly, he was sitting by the door. It could be the rain. It's starting to rain, so my skylight's above my head. That's probably what you're hearing. So
Oh,
hopefully our audience isn't hearing it, but we'll
no,
see. Or
I thought I heard a sound in the background that was the dog getting excited. Maybe I just missed
no, I think it's probably rain beating down above me. So
it. Okay.
hopefully the magic of audio editing will allow our audience to wonder what we're talking about.
Yeah. All right. So then the other thing in the Eastern Conference, Mike, that I wanted to talk about was this whole debacle in Toronto. Uh,
Ooh, man.
this guy. Listen. I I'm not blaming anyone on this except for the guy, but NBA, all these major sports franchises, all these major sports leagues, you fended off gambling for a long time. You pushed it off, and now it's here, and you're partnering with all these companies. What did you think was like this was going to eventually happen, right, Mike? Like this was eventually going to happen. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. But the bottom line is this: Mr. Porter, right? His last name's Porter, right? Porter,
Correct.
of the Toronto Raptors, not his brother, Michael Porter Jr. His decided that he was going to bet on some unders on himself, and instead of like trying to be conspicuous about it and betting like a dollar or two and just making a little bit of money, he decided that he was going to throw like 10 grand and 8 grand and all this stuff on it, and here we are. He got caught. He bet the under on all these things. And by the way, the 2 games that he bet the unders on, he had mysterious injuries that he left after the first quarter, or part of the way through the first quarter or first half. And it doesn't look good. And there's been all these people, of course, trying to scour different things. And there's been some, like, it's like the Zapruder films are going on with with him. Like there was the 3-point shot he took and he banked it. Like it looked terrible and he banked it. And then he kind of gave a oops, like he didn't mean to do that look, and like he just cost someone some money. And then there was the whole thing about how I couldn't find it. I tried finding it, but I saw someone had paid him 10 grand for his jersey number, and then after, maybe it was RJ Barrett or part of that trade or whatever, and when that trade he got 10 grand, and then 5 days later is when he bet the one 10 grand bet. So it's just, it's not good, Mike. It's not good for sports to have all this stuff possibly lingering in the future. Obviously, I think there's going to be other people. This happens obviously in the Major League Baseball is currently dealing with the Otani stuff, and which is much higher profile because who it is. Um, and I don't know. They've launched a formal investigation. Otani says that he did nothing wrong, but it seems a little strange that his translator had access to all his financial information. That seems a little suspicious to me, Mike. I don't know how you feel on it, but
Well,
um,
yeah, you wouldn't think that the translator would be somebody that would have all your account numbers. Maybe your financial advisor, but probably not your interpreter. You wouldn't
yes.
think.
So, anyways, um, that's that's what I'm gonna say, Mike. I don't know if you have any thoughts. What your thoughts are on the whole situation?
So I'll piggyback off your first point, which is that it was sort of inevitable that this was going to happen. And when you look at how, for basically the entire history of professional sports, the threat of gambling becoming involved in those professional sports was looked upon with extreme fear by the leagues. It was one of the things that they were most worried about across all sports, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA. They wanted no part of betting, gambling. They didn't want it to be a part of their sport. They didn't want it to risk the integrity of the games. And that is going back from the origins of the league, right? You think about the Donaghy scandal, you think about the Black Sox in baseball. Just leagues were definitely afraid of gambling influencing the outcome of games. And then suddenly, as sports betting becomes legal across the country in many, many states, suddenly all the leagues realize, hey, here's a new source of revenue. And look, I'm sure it's been a huge, I don't know what the numbers are, but clearly sports betting has pumped a huge amount of money into league coffers across all sports. And when that becomes such a big part of just the discussion of your league, and there's so many people that are betting on a daily basis, whether it be prop bets like we're talking about here, over under on a player scoring total, or you're talking about the outcomes of games themselves. And look, I don't claim to know a ton about all the gambling that you can do, but I know there's a lot of different things that you can bet on in any different night, in any different game. And so the idea that you're going to have all this gambling around your games and discussed in relation to your games, and that no player, no one, when you have literally billions of dollars at stake, that a player is not somehow going to go off path and do something like we have in this case. I think that would be very naive to think that that wasn't going to happen. And clearly, in this case, it certainly appears, based on first glance, that what we have is a situation where a player was trying to influence their own outcome, if not the outcome of the game, and benefit from that in some form or
Yeah,
fashion financially. So then that leads to my second point, which is how does the NBA handle this situation? And what is the penalty in this case for a player manipulating his own outcome and potentially the outcome of a game? And you can look at it a number of ways. You can look at it and say, well, in other sports, there's been a precedent of guys have been suspended for a year. You could look at in football, what's the name of the guy, the receiver that got suspended from the Falcons? He wasn't playing, he was sitting out anyway,
oh,
but he got suspended for a season.
Calvin
What's that
Ridley,
guy's name?
Calvin Ridley,
Calvin
Calvin
Ridley.
Ridley.
So
Yeah,
he was suspended for a year. You look at the Pete Rose situation in baseball, and he's been banned for what now,
Well,
30 some
he's
odd
banned.
years.
He's
He's probably
banned. He's been banned. Like he's not, but he's they've like started to like welcome him back into the fold a little bit. Like he's
right,
been able to go,
but
but
still,
he can't do
but
anything.
basically, look,
Essentially, he's
official,
banned.
and he can't
Yeah,
be in the hall, and he can't be in the Hall of Fame. So
yeah.
he wasn't an active
Do you
player.
see what
Obviously, he
he
was doing that
tweeted?
while he was managing.
Did he see what
No, what
he
did Pete
tweeted?
tweet? No,
Or
no.
he said, if I could have gotten away with it. I had a translator.
Pete, well, let's put it this way. Look, Pete Rose, one of the greatest hitters of all time, and obviously the all-time hit king. I'm not sure he's a very good dude. Let's put it that way.
Oh,
I'm not sure he's the best person, but
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Irrelevant in terms of this. But I guess my point is that you have lots of different examples of what penalties might or might not be. And so in this case, you could make one argument that, hey, this is the first time it's happened since we've partnered with all these online sports books. We need to make an example of this guy. Let's suspend him for 5 years, or let's ban him indefinitely and set a precedent. But then you look at it and you say, okay, well, what if instead of a guy who's a two-way player for the Toronto Raptors, what if it's suddenly a guy who is a top 50 player or an all-star player that loses his mind for a second and decides they're going to do something similar? Do you want players in the prime of their career as an all-star to be suspended for 5 years or suspended indefinitely? I'm not sure that is what the league wants. But yet at the same time, they clearly don't want this repeated. And if it was done, if this guy wasn't a two-way contract guy for the Raptors, if it really was an all-star player, you'd have it would be a much bigger scandal. It would be clearly covered much more heavily than what this story has been covered. It would lead every single news story and news outlet and website and podcast and everything else. So I don't know where you go. I guess I would lean towards the side of they want to send a message, but they also do not want to paint themselves into a corner where if a bigger name gets caught with this, that guy is banned for 5 years or 10 years or for life. I think you're looking at more along the lines of that Calvin Ridley suspension where this guy's suspended for a year. And I'm not saying the NBA blacklists him, but I would guess that he's probably played his last NBA game, not because he's going to be suspended for life, but because there's going to be an unwritten wink, wink rule that, hey, we're not bringing this guy back. Versus if, again, if it was an all-star player, you've got a completely different scenario. And
yeah,
I think the league's going to be weary of setting a precedent that it may make sense for a guy on a two-way contract, but it might not make sense for an all-star if that makes any sense. So I see it being like a 1 year suspension, maybe two, but this guy never is going to play in the league ever again.
yeah. I would agree. I don't think he's ever going to see the light of day. Hopefully, Michael Porter Jr. doesn't catch any flack.
Hopefully not. Hopefully
So,
not. Who
um,
knows?
yeah. So those were the main things that I wanted to talk about. Was there anything? Well, there was something else I feel like we talked and said when we talked earlier when we were talking about what we were going to talk about tonight, but I can't remember what that was, Mike.
Well, I think we kind of hit on the East, right? When we're talking about the Cavs and kind of where we hope they finish. And I think when you look at the Eastern Conference, you're looking at a situation where the 10 teams are pretty much set. And we thought we had that in the Western Conference, but we'll talk about that in a second. That maybe, although Golden State winning tonight on the road in Miami certainly was a huge win for them to sort of keep their playoff standings alive. But I think in the Eastern Conference, you're pretty much locked in that Atlanta and Chicago are going to be the 9 and 10. Then you have Miami and Philadelphia, both 18 games behind the Celtics, and then the Pacers are a game and a half ahead of the Heat and Sixers. I kind of feel like Miami and Philadelphia are going to hang in that 7-8 spot, and I'm not sure that Indiana can catch Orlando. I think the intrigue is from Milwaukee to Orlando, where those four teams finish. And like I said, from a Cavalier standpoint, I think you'd rather have an easier first round series, avoid the Knicks, avoid Miami, potentially avoid Philadelphia with Embiid. And if you could get Orlando or Indiana, two young teams without playoff experience, I would feel pretty good about the Cavs winning that first round series. And then you go into whether it's playing Milwaukee or Boston, they'd have home court advantage, Boston or Milwaukee would. And I think the Cavs, I don't think it would really matter that much if they had a home court advantage. I think those would be two tough series, regardless of whether you were the home court team or whether you weren't. So
Yeah.
I'd rather have them win a first round series and then take my chances, see what happens from there against either Boston or Milwaukee. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my take on the Eastern Conference. And then I say we talk a little bit about sort of the Western Conference playoff race and
So
what's
so I
going
was
on
just
there.
so here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm looking at Houston's schedule and I'm looking at Golden State's schedule. Like
Okay.
I'm
All
going to
right.
rattle off Houston's schedule the rest of the way.
Got it. Okay.
Oklahoma City, Utah, Dallas, Minnesota, Golden State. That's a big one. Miami, Dallas, Orlando, Utah, Portland, Clippers. That's that's three for sure wins. The rest are toss ups. Well, three wins you should feel good about if you're Houston. That's not a good sign for the Houston Rockets. And that's them saying, by the way, they've won 9 in a row. They are the hottest team in the NBA. Okay. And then here is Golden State's schedule the rest of the way. Orlando, Charlotte, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, Dallas, Utah, Lakers, Portland, Pelicans, Utah. They have a much softer schedule, Golden State. Right? I mean, you got San Antonio, you got Charlotte, you got Utah twice, you got Portland. That's 5 games that they should win.
You got
Right?
5 games you should win. Although they're on the road for what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they're at home. They're only at home for 4. So that makes a difference being on the road. Although what's funny about the Warriors is you think about last year, right? Their home and away splits last year. They were like ridiculously good at home, and then they were ridiculously almost comically bad on the road. And then you look at this season, and they're below 500 on the road at home. They're 18 and 19 at home, and then they're 19 and 15 on the road. So I mean, makes no sense, right? When you think about the difference between last year and this year. So I don't know what to make of any of that. I would have to say that if you're betting on one of those two teams, you'd have to feel more confident betting on a team that's led by Steph Curry versus the Houston Rockets. And yet, I mean, it's funny with Houston because if you go back 3 weeks ago, I think most people had come to the conclusion that the best young player, the best asset, the cornerstone of what Houston was going to become, that the guy who had evolved into that for them was Şengün. And then Şengün goes down with whatever, I think the ankle injury, and suddenly the team rips off 9 victories in a row. And look, here's Jalen Green's last 6 games: 37, 26, 42, 26, 41, 27. And you go back a month and a half to the trade deadline, and there was legitimate conversation. I don't know if there was legitimate conversation within the Rockets organization, but there certainly was amongst the media and NBA fans of, should the Rockets trade Jalen Green? Is this guy ever going to get it and figure it out? And look, it's a small sample size, but that's a pretty good line of games to say, hey, maybe it's starting to come together for this guy. Maybe
Yeah.
he's starting to figure it out. And then they've played small, and Jabari Smith has played a lot of center for them. And he's quietly had a really, really good season. I don't think he's ever going to be, it was probably the right pick to have him go number 3 after Chet and Paolo and how well that the two of them have played. And they look like they're going to be, at worst, sort of the second best player on potentially championship teams. I think Paolo probably is going to be, his ceiling is probably being the best player. I'm not sure Chet, just because of his position, is necessarily going to be there, but Chet could be a good 1A or certainly a good number 2. Whereas Jabari, I think, is just going to be a guy who, he's going to play really well defensively. I think he'll get better and continue to improve as an offensive player, but he's never going to be your number one guy, but he's going to be a very, very good player in the league. And so playing him at center just has kind of unlocked these lineups and spread the floor for Jalen Green. So I just think that it's interesting again how the narrative has flipped on the Rockets, where people were ready to ship Green out of town 6 weeks ago, and Şengün was the guy that everybody was like, "Oh man, this guy." And now you're looking at it going, maybe we're better off with Jabari Smith playing center, and that gives us space for these other guys and maybe allows them to reach their ceiling. It's a good problem to have that you've got almost, I don't want to say too many good players because Houston's only one game over 500, but they have a lot of young guys that are players that other teams would certainly want and guys that look like could be part of your long-term future. And so Houston, I would still bet on Steph Curry and the Warriors to make it out. But if Steph turns an ankle or something goes haywire in Golden State, the fact that Houston has put themselves in the running to be able to make the
conversation,
play-in after where they were 9 games ago, where they were 5 or 6 games behind the Lakers and Golden State, to rip off 9 wins in a row, pretty impressive. Even though they're beating some of the worst teams in the league during that time, it still speaks to, I think, what Ime Udoka has done. And that team just, look, you got to keep playing. And it's clearly they haven't quit. And for Jalen Green, like I said, to make the turnaround that he's made, where people were seriously considering whether or not the Rockets should trade him, to now suddenly he's a guy that is just putting up big numbers every single night. It'll be interesting to see how they finish this season, whether they make it to the playoffs or not. It'll be interesting to see whether they can finish the season strong, or is this going to be whatever, once this streak ends, are they going to kind of fall apart? And I think that'll speak a lot about what Houston is going to continue to be and where these guys are at. I think I like what they have. I mean, I think their core of young guys is going to be pretty good for years to come.
Yeah, I think once again, speaking on the court, Ime Udoka is proven to be a really, really good coach.
Agreed.
And hopefully he's put the nonsense behind him, whatever exactly happened. I don't think we ever really truly knew what happened, right? They never really came out with all the details,
no,
and nor do I really want to know at this point. But
correct.
So hopefully we're moving, they're moving past that, and we'll just see. Houston, I felt like when we talked earlier this year, that we both were pretty high on Houston. I think I was pretty high on Houston. I thought they were their upside. Maybe I was wrong. I don't remember. I don't know if you have your folder handy there, Mike.
Let's see. I have it somewhere. I know it was sitting around here. Somewhere, but I don't have.
It's okay. It's all right.
Well, I'll roll away while you talk, and
you're rolling away. Oh no, Mike's rolling away.
I'm rolling away to find the folder. So
okay,
you talk, and I'm rolling away for 10 seconds to find the folder.
Okay. All right. So I think the big thing is this, what can they do to get better? And I obviously I'm not sitting here and looking at their salary cap for them and what options they have, but I think they're a young team, and I think they can build from it. They're not as young as Oklahoma City, so obviously Oklahoma City's got a little bit of a head start on them. I think the other thing too is when you look at the teams in the West, there just seems to be the teams in the West seem to be better, and their problem is going to be they're going to be competing with teams in the West that, if they were in the East, I think Houston would be in for sure a situation. If they were in the East, they would be competing for a 7 or 8 seed right now, not competing for a 9 or a 10 seed. I don't know how you feel on that, but and if you
the
can't,
the future would definitely be brighter. I don't know where the folder went. The future would definitely be brighter for Houston in the Eastern Conference, and not even the future, right? I mean, the team is the team, but clearly you look at the West, and the Western Conference is just, at this point, it's just ridiculous how good the Western Conference is.
Except for the Clippers, they don't have an identity anymore.
Well, They have an identity. I'm just not sure it's the one that they want or thought they had for a 20 game stretch there in the middle of the season. I'm not sure that that of all the teams, I'm not so sure I wouldn't want to play the Clippers just because, well, we've talked about it to the nth degree. I think the thing with the Western Conference, right? If you're Houston and you're looking around and you say to yourself, okay, if you go through each team and which team is going to be there for the foreseeable future. Denver going to be there for the foreseeable future. Oklahoma City going to be there. Minnesota going to be there. The Clippers, debatable. The Pelicans, I think going to be there. Dallas, Luka puts. I mean, your floor is pretty high when you have Dallas. Sacramento, say what you want, but De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis are two guys that if you have those two guys on your team, I don't think you're playing below 500 basketball at this point in their careers. Phoenix, could they fall off? Injury, maybe. The Lakers could, I guess, theoretically, potentially fall off depending on what LeBron wants to
I'm
do.
coming home. I'm coming.
But if LeBron comes back and you have LeBron and AD, I think this is
No.
the Lakers are as
He's
bad
not.
as.
I'm making it right now, Mike. He's not going to be a Laker next year.
All right,
I don't know that
we'll
I don't
see.
know. I know. We've had after their the Cavs' abysmal loss on Miami. I texted Mike and said, "Have I mentioned that I think the Cavs could really use a LeBron?" But I don't think he's a Laker next year.
All right, so then the Lakers potentially could fall off. I think Golden State clearly could fall off. Houston's obviously on the rise. Utah, I think, is still. I'm not sure what they're doing. I'm not sure where they are in terms of their rebuild. They obviously have a lot of draft capital coming from Minnesota and the Cavs, although none of it at this point, with as good as those two teams are and where they sit in the standings, none of those are plum picks as of this moment that are going to be franchise altering. But so I'm not sure where Utah is in their rebuild. Memphis, you get Ja back on the court healthy, and that was a team that their core was number 2 in the West last season. So you got to think they're going to be
I,
much, much better next
I meant
year,
to bring this
provided
up.
Ja
Like
comes back.
I meant to bring this up like a week and a half ago. Did you see The Rock took a shot at Ja on SmackDown? Did you see
No, I
that?
did not. No.
So I know you're not probably up on the whole wrestling scene, and I had completely been off on the wrestling scene, but now The Rock is back, so I've been kind of just like I catch it on the TikTok a little bit, Mike. I try to kick it, and he
All right.
sang a song about this guy, his I don't want his adversary right now in the WWE,
All right.
and he said you're as useless as Ja Morant when he's waving around a gun. And then he goes,
Oh,
"I
there you
love you,
go.
Ja. I love you, Ja." It was pretty funny. Like I hope get better soon, but I thought it was
All
pretty
right, there you
funny.
go.
It was
All right.
in Memphis too. The
Okay.
episode was in Memphis, so there was a reason for that connection. But I thought it
Gotcha.
was pretty.
Okay.
I thought it was Ja taking like pot shots getting taken by The Rock.
Taking some
Rock.
shrapnel from the Rock.
Yeah.
So Memphis is going to be better. Portland, I don't know where they're actually at. Theoretically, they should be semi better, but I'm guessing they're probably a tanking team next year. And then we've talked about the Spurs. I mean, I think the Spurs, if I was going to bet right now on what team is going to take the biggest leap up the standings next year, to me, I think San Antonio or Memphis are probably both.
I saw an interesting trade floated out there, Mike.
Okay, lay it on me.
Devin Vassell in their
All right.
and the first round pick or second round pick for Darius Garland.
Well, look, oh man, I kind of like that trade. I kind of like that trade for both teams.
I saw that
I
floated
think
out there in the either.
I think Garland is probably a better talent.
But I think Vassell might be a better.
Vassell fits, I think, really well with what the Cavaliers already have on the roster.
If the Cavs feel good, if the Cavs were to feel good about Donovan Mitchell's future and staying in Cleveland, if he signs that contract extension, then I would be okay with that trade. Right?
I agree. Yes, I agree. I would be fine with it. Like, and look, I like Garland, but I feel like this year he's kind of reverted, not all the way back to when he was a rookie. He's not nearly as bad as he was that year, but I just feel like he turns the ball over way too much. And it feels like there's something off. And I don't know whether it's been the injuries that he's gone through this year, whether it's just the fact of he's not as comfortable as he was pre Donovan Mitchell. I don't know what to make of the whole thing, but I do know that he's still a really good passer. He still has the ability to score. And if I'm San Antonio, he's really good at throwing lob passes. And he's proven that time and time again with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen here in Cleveland. So I could see where he would be a guy that the Spurs might want to put in the backcourt with Victor Wembanyama. And then conversely, like we said, on the Cavs side of it, if you take Garland out of the equation, now you clearly just make Donovan Mitchell your point guard. You put Vassell in at the three. That allows you to slide Max Strus back to the two. Vassell is a really good shooter at the three, better defender than anybody they have. Clearly, he's a better overall player than some of the other guys that were playing at the three as far as being an all-around guy, better offensively than Okoro. I would say a better overall player than Dean Wade. And so then you still have the Mobley Allen overlap, but I think Vassell just makes Donovan Mitchell your point guard, and then you go from there and see what you have. So I wouldn't be super opposed to that trade. I like Garland. I think Garland running his own team could make sense. I don't like the idea of I don't think you can win a championship with Mitchell and Garland as your two guards. I just think that two guys at that size, you're just never going to be as effective as you need to be on the defensive end, and their skill sets are redundant. So if I could get something that maybe Vassell is 90%, 90 cents on the dollar for Darius Garland, because I'm not sure Vassell is an all-star talent, but I think he might be a better fit. And he's a really, really good player. And sometimes you need really, really, really good players around your stars who don't necessarily need the ball or kind of overlap the way Garland does. So I'd be okay with that trade. And I think it would make sense for San Antonio too. I think Garland's a guy who's young enough that he fits the window with Wembanyama. And I think the window, look, not to win a championship, but the window to be a winning team opens up next year for San Antonio because I think the sky's the limit for what Wembanyama can be.
Okay, I agree. I saw that trade and I thought I'd share it with you. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know the money piece of it all and all that, but I can't imagine Vasil's making that much money, right? Like because he's still on a
He signed an extension. He's making pretty big money. He's
okay.
not making as much as Garland, but I think he signed, I don't know it off the top of my head, but he's making a good amount of money. Let's put it that way. I'm gonna look it up while we're talking here and see if I can find it quick. Because I forget. I think he signed an extension uh, roster. I think they have the contracts. Yes, they do. Let's see. Devin Vassell. Well, of course, it only has this year's salary, but let me see if I click on Vassell, what it gives me for contract wise. News bio. I think he signed an extension. Yeah, they don't have his contract, his full contract on here. I only see what he's making this year, which I know that, like I said, I'm pretty sure he signed an
He
extension.
signed he
Um,
signed a here you go. San Antonio signed I'm on Sport Track. I don't know what you're on, but
okay.
signed Sport Track. He has got a 5-year contract. He'll be next year he'll be making 29, then 27, 27, 24 and a half, 27. He's unrestricted in 2029.
There you go. So you'd have him locked up for the long term, which Garland is also locked up for the long term. And so Vassell's not cheap, but again, is he a $30 million player? Probably, right? I mean, he's averaging
Yeah.
almost 20 a game, shoots it well from three. He'd be a guy again that would fit really well in the Cavs. Good defender. So I don't know. I'd be okay with that trade, and I think San Antonio fans would probably be okay with that trade too.
Okay.
I
All
have
right.
one last question for you, unless there's something else that
No, I don't
you want
have.
to hit on.
No, no.
Okay, so my last and final question, I guess, is: do you think the Pelicans overtake the Clippers here? They're a half game behind
Yes.
right now
Yes.
as we speak. I agree.
Yes.
I agree. Yeah, I think so too. And so now you look at New Orleans probably having home court advantage more than likely. I mean, the Clippers are only a game and a half ahead of Dallas, so maybe Dallas jumps the Clippers. And they're only a game ahead of I mean, the Pelicans are only a game ahead of the Mavericks. There's so much fluidity. Again, Phoenix is only 2.5 games out of the 4 seed at this point. So even though we were basically burying Phoenix a minute ago, they're they're nearly as close to the Clippers as the Cavs are to the Bucks. So
Yeah.
it's probably premature to bury anybody in that Western Conference from spots 4 through 8. I think it's going to be pretty fluid. And if one of those teams catches fire, if I had to bet on it right now as it stands, I think it finishes New Orleans at 4, Dallas at 5, Clippers at 6, Kings at 7, Lakers at 8, Suns at 9, Warriors at 10. That's how I see it.
I mean, my only I know the Suns have to have the gauntlet, but like if LeBron's not, I mean, I don't know how many more games he's gonna miss. Um, he's missed
I
10
just don't know
games
how
this
many
year.
wins. I just don't know how many wins there are on that Phoenix schedule. I mean, that Phoenix schedule is brutal. That is just brutal.
Well, you can count on them
And
winning
it's
the
not
game
like they've
against
been
the
playing
Cavs, probably. But
right. Of course, that was the one game they played really well. And
um,
look, the Cavs have made a lot of teams look good recently. So thankfully, they didn't make Charlotte look good last night. And hopefully, they'll take care of business again
listen, we didn't talk
tonight
about it.
for
We didn't talk
most of
about it,
the.
Mike.
What's that?
How about the junkyard dog, baby? Morris. Morris. Did you see his press conference after the game?
No, after he got
I was
tossed, what do you
I was
say?
just I was just sick of them going to the lane and getting a wide open bucket. So I decided I was going to throw an elbow. If that's what my team needs
Okay.
me to do, if that's what my team needs me to do, I'm going to do it. They gave him the gold chain after the game, Mike. They gave him the
All
gold
right.
chain
So
after the
here's
game.
what.
He played 7 minutes. And that
Look,
completely changed the complexion of the game. It really did. Him getting it like listen, I know it's a small victory, okay? It's a small victory. But he's the only reason we won 3 games ago. Hitting those threes. And then that game. So that's 2 games that he's theoretically changed the outcome of the game.
I am not a fan of the Morris brothers, as anyone who has listened to the podcast knows about me. But I will say that sort of having a tough slash borderline dirty player on your team, sometimes in the playoffs, messages need to be sent, or at least there needs to be somebody who is willing to fight back, and also somebody who's willing to fight back that if they do get ejected, doesn't crush your team because they're one of your 3, 4, 5 best players. So
Would you
from
call him the
that
Dante
standpoint,
Jones of this team, Mike? The Dante Jones of
yeah,
this team?
exactly. If that's what I'm getting from Marcus Morris, if what I'm getting is a dose of intimidation and physical revenge when the Cavaliers are coming out, maybe not let's playing soft, and Morris can inject a level of toughness, then I'm okay with that. I don't want Marcus Morris playing 22 minutes a game and taking 8 shots in his 22 minutes.
Unless he
I
makes all
want him
8 of
out
them.
there to, unless he makes all 8 of them. And he's played, I guess you could say, well since he's been here, but there's certainly an element of Marcus Morris that I do not want on this team. But the element of bringing a little bit of physical intimidation and toughness and just saying, hey, we're not putting up with getting pushed around and being physically manhandled. If he can come in and sort of right that ship at key moments in the playoffs,
There you
so be
go.
it. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. So,
All right, let's end it
all
there,
right,
Mike.
let's end it there
We will.
on
We
the
are gonna.
Marcus Morris, the positivity of Marcus Morris.
We
Let's that.
we
Let's
we are going to be on a 2 week hiatus unless you do a solo episode next week, Mike. But you've always said that maybe you're going to do a solo episode and then it never happens. So I'm going to say we're going to be on a 2 week hiatus.
we'll see. We'll see what I can pull off. We'll see. I have a little bit of, well, I guess I always have lead time. It's not like you surprise me and say suddenly like you're going to be at Disney the night before you go. So I do have some advance warning, which I normally do. So maybe I'll work to try to get
Maybe Cal.
somebody to
Maybe
come on
Cal
and
would. Cal hop on and talk about NBA. Would he talk
he
about the
might.
NBA?
I don't know. We could see. I don't know. We could see. I don't know. I'll figure something out. I even if I just do a, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do a solo episode. Those are A, not fun to do, and B, they're really difficult. Kudos to anybody who can even do 10 or 15 minutes talking just completely on their own. It's much, much more difficult than it looks. So maybe I'll work on getting an
Special
NBA
guest.
guest. Who knows? We'll see what a special guest. There you go. We'll see what I can do. So maybe we will see you for next week's NBA episode. You certainly will see us for our next interview episodes. I believe after this one, the next one coming up will be triple number. Ugh, can never say it. Triple double number 8 with Rob Brost. That's what's going up on Thursday night for our regular episodes. So make sure you check that one out. Thanks for sticking with us tonight for this NBA episode, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks.